Well, I suppose that's somewhat self-explanatory. You would be consuming alcohol without being in a social situation. And whether or not it's a problem would depend on why you're doing it and how often you're doing it and how much you're drinking, what the quantity is, and potentially how long you've been doing that as well. So alcohol use disorder is a spectrum. And I recall early on in my drinking years, actually back when I was in college, I noticed that I would have a six-pack of beer at around senior year of college in my room in case we weren't going to go out to party that night. And I would drink it. And sometimes my friends would come in and hang out for maybe 20 minutes at a time. We were all doing homework. I ended up writing my senior honors thesis, essentially intoxicated, drinking alone. And it occurred to me at some point that that could be a problem. But I thought to myself, oh, I'm in college. People in college drink whenever they want. So I socially justified it. And then I moved on to continue drinking alone. And my drinking alone escalated throughout my years in finance. So, and there were some ebbs and flows, but that drinking alone is a problem for sure if you feel a visceral primal need for alcohol, because that's what alcohol dependence technically is, physical dependence. I was drinking alone before I got to that point, but I'm sure that the drinking alone helped me get to that point, because over time, when you drink, most people know that your tolerance increases. What a lot of people are not aware of is that there are certain neurotransmitters, such as GABA, which is the primary calming neurotransmitter in your brain, and glutamate, which is the counterbalancing electrical activity increasing neurotransmitter, in other words, not calming, but stimulatory, excitatory neurotransmitter. And you can end up with a long-term deficiency in GABA and essentially too much glutamate activity due to alcohol, because alcohol effectively subs in for the GABA. It increases GABA activity, but it actually depletes your long-term supply, your baseline supply of GABA, because your brain says, well, if we're going to keep drinking, i.e., and we're going to keep drinking alone, then we don't need to make so much GABA, because this ethanol stuff is going to keep subbing in for it. So you end up with too much glutamate. You end up with anxiousness. You feel jumpy. You might have heightened, reflexes. So I remember probably several years into my work in finance, if something jumped out at me, I lived in New York City. So it could be a car coming around the corner or like an elevator shaft that sounded weird. I would like jump. I would, whoa. And if anyone was around me, they would notice, because I was jumpy. That was too much glutamate activity. And that was caused by drinking too much. But a lot of my drinking was drinking alone. So as usual, I delved a bit too much into the biochemistry, perhaps, but I hope it's helpful for anyone wondering why they might have a primal scream for alcohol when it seems to be socially inappropriate. We do have certain social norms that say that you shouldn't drink to some extent when you're not alone. But then again, you turn on the movies or TV or Netflix and there are people drinking alone all the time. So it can be very confusing as someone who's on that slippery slope towards addiction to try to figure out whether or not what they're doing is socially justified. I like to step outside of that box and say, well, what's actually going on inside of your body? Do you have signs of physical dependence? If you do, then it's potentially going to become a problem, if it's not already. If you don't feel that primal need for alcohol, and again, it's a spectrum. So you might feel like you're a little bit bummed out if you don't drink alone. You might feel slightly depressed. It took me years before I got to the point where I felt that scream and then literally had hallucinations if I didn't drink. It took about 5 or 6 years in between those points along that slippery slope towards full-on, severe physical dependence. But, a lot of people think that if you have a bad breakup or you lose your job, it's okay to go home and have a glass of wine. Or maybe if you had a stressful day at work, it's okay to go home and have a glass of wine. But if you ask yourself, why am I doing this and how much do I need this? If you rank on a scale of 1 to 10 that need, and it's over a 5, even if it just seems to be an emotional or a psychological motivation for drinking and you don't have the physical dependence, then you should be aware that it could become a physical dependence with repetition. So a primarily emotional or psychological or spiritual issue that's seeming to compel you to drink, if not physically, could eventually result in you feeling physically compelled to drink. So it is a slippery slope. But then again, of course, there are a lot of people who do occasionally drink alone, and it is not a problem for them. So this is not a moral issue. I'm not a prohibitionist. I don't see consuming alcohol, whether alone or socially, as an immoral act. But what we focus on here is addiction. So I think it is crucial to understand, have self-knowledge and understand what's going on inside of your body, inside of your brain, what's going on with your psychology. If you have a social life in which you're drinking a lot already, and then you also drink alone, then you might want to ask yourself, why are you doing that? You know, and the hierarchy of things, or the priority list of things in your life, is alcohol, you know, going from a number 30 to a number 10 to a number 1 or 2. If it gets to the point where it's all you think about or all you ruminate about, or if it's in that top 5 at all times, then you might want to keep an eye on it.